My name's Marcus Reed, and I believe every broken thing deserves a chance to run again. 36 years old, been turning wrenches since before I could legally drive. Took over Reed's Auto from my old man when he decided his heart couldn't handle another Milwaukee winter. Smart man, my father. Left me a decent business and a piece of advice. Fix what's broken, Marcus, but know when something's beyond repair. I live by that philosophy, whether I'm rebuilding an engine or navigating what's left of my personal life. The shop sits on Commerce Street, sandwiched between Kowalski's Deli and a pawn shop that's changed hands 6 times in 10 years. Nothing flashy about Reed's Auto, just honest work, fair prices, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Most folks in Green Bay know they can count on me to diagnose their troubles and give it to them straight. No sugarcoating, no unnecessary upsells. My personal life runs simpler than a '92 Toyota. Divorced 2 years back, Jennifer decided she wanted excitement, and apparently a mechanic who came home exhausted didn't qualify. Can't say I blame her. We split amicably enough, no kids to complicate things. Now I've got a 1-bedroom apartment above Murphy's Tavern, which means I never lack for entertainment or regrets come closing time. Routine keeps me sane. Up at 5:30, black coffee, check the news, shop by 7. Work until the light fails or the last customer leaves, whichever comes first. Evenings involve leftover pizza, Brewers games on the radio, and the occasional beer with Murphy himself. Simple, predictable, exactly how I like it. Until that Tuesday evening when simplicity took a header off a cliff. I just finished wrestling with a stubborn transmission on a '08 Silverado when I spotted her on Elm Street. White sedan, hood up, hazards blinking like a mechanical SOS. The woman standing beside it looked ready to negotiate with either God or the devil, whichever might get her engine running. I pulled my F-150 behind her car and climbed out. "Afternoon, ma'am. Sounds like you're having some automotive disagreements." She turned and I caught myself staring. Auburn hair escaping from a ponytail, green cardigan over dark jeans, and eyes the color of storm clouds. But what struck me wasn't her looks. It was the way she held herself, like someone who'd learned to expect disappointment, but hadn't quite given up fighting it. "It just died," she said, gesturing helplessly at the engine. "Middle of the road, no warning. 1 minute I'm driving, the next I'm having a conversation with a car that won't talk back." I grinned. "Well, that's where I come in. I speak fluent automobile." Popping the hood, I leaned in and started my examination. Check the obvious culprits first. Battery connections, belts, fluids. Everything looked normal until I tested the starter relay. Dead as disco. "Your starter relay's fried," I announced, straightening up. "Easy fix, but you'll need a tow." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Of course it is. How much are we talking?" "For the relay? $20. For the tow and labor? Probably another 60. I wiped my hands on a rag I keep in my back pocket. "I can call Jimmy's Towing, or if you trust a complete stranger, I can haul you to my shop. Won't charge for the tow." Her eyebrows rose. "That's generous of a complete stranger." "Well, I prefer mysteriously charitable stranger," I said with a shrug. "Sounds more intriguing." That earned me a genuine laugh, the first one I'd heard from her. "Okay, mysteriously charitable stranger. I'm Sarah, and I accept your offer." "Marcus," I said, extending a hand she shook without hesitation. "And you've made the right choice. My shop's got the best coffee in a 6-block radius." 20 minutes later, we were at Reed's Auto. Sarah watched me hook up her sedan, efficient and careful with her property. I've found people judge you based on how you handle their belongings, especially when those belongings are expensive and essential to their daily lives. "I'll have the part tomorrow morning," I told her as I finished securing the car. "Should be ready by noon." She nodded, then seemed to hesitate. Would you mind if I bought you dinner? As a thank you for stopping. There's a place called Antonio's just down the street." Now, I'm not typically the type to accept invitations from women I've just met. Too many variables, too much potential for complications. But something about Sarah made me curious. Maybe it was the way she'd laughed, or how she hadn't flinched when I'd wiped motor oil on my jeans. "Antonio's makes a decent lasagna," I said. "Lead the way." Dinner turned into 3 hours of easy conversation. Sarah worked as a librarian at the downtown branch, had lived in Green Bay for 8 years, loved mystery novels and hated romantic comedies. She asked intelligent questions about my work, seemed genuinely interested in the mechanics of automotive repair. What she didn't mention was the thin gold band she still wore on her left hand, or why she lived alone in a house clearly meant for two people. I didn't ask. When I walked her to her door, she paused on the porch steps. "Thank you again, Marcus, for everything." "Just doing my job," I said, though we both knew stopping for stranded motorists wasn't technically part of my job description. She smiled, unlocked her door, then turned back to me. "The coffee really is excellent, by the way." "Told you." I drove home that night with the radio off, thinking about storm cloud eyes and the way some people carry their stories like carefully guarded secrets. The next morning, I had Sarah's car running smooth as silk before my second cup of coffee. New relay installed, battery tested, all fluids topped off. I'd even run it through the car wash, though I'd only charge her for the mechanical work. She arrived just after noon, walking through the bay doors like she belonged there. Today she wore a blue dress that matched her eyes and a leather jacket that had seen better decades but suited her perfectly. "How's my patient, Doc?" she asked, approaching her car with the cautious hope of someone who'd been disappointed by mechanics before. "Clean bill of health," I said, handing her the keys. "Should run for another 100,000 miles with proper maintenance." She slipped behind the wheel, turned the ignition. The engine purred to life immediately, running smoother than it had when she'd first bought it. "Marcus, you're a miracle worker," she said, climbing back out. "What do I owe you?" I handed her the bill, parts and labor, nothing fancy. She studied it, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This seems low." "It's fair. You could have charged me twice this." "I could have," I agreed, "but then I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every morning, and I've got enough problems with that as it is." She laughed again, that same genuine sound that had caught my attention the day before. "Well, let me at least buy you lunch." "You don't owe me anything, Sarah." "I know," she said simply, "but I'd like to anyway." This time we went to Murphy's Tavern. Murphy himself was working the bar, a mountain of a man with forearms like tree trunks and a philosophy degree from Marquette that he'd never used for anything except winning bar arguments. "Marcus," he boomed as we entered, "and who's this lovely lady?" "Sarah, meet Murphy." "Murphy, don't embarrass me." "Wouldn't dream of it," Murphy said with a grin that suggested exactly the opposite. "Sarah, you should know this man once fixed my delivery truck with nothing but duct tape and determination." "That sounds about right," Sarah said, sliding onto a bar stool. We ordered burgers and talked about everything except the important stuff. Her past, my divorce, the careful way she avoided mentioning anyone significant in her life. Instead, we discussed books, shared funny customer stories, debated the Packers' chances this season. After lunch, she insisted on seeing my apartment upstairs. I protested half-heartedly, aware that my living situation wasn't exactly impressive. One bedroom, kitchenette, a bathroom small enough to shave while sitting on the toilet. "It's functional," I said as she looked around. "It's perfect for you," she replied, running her hand along my small bookshelf. "No unnecessary clutter. Everything serves a purpose. Like you." That observation struck me as oddly intimate, the kind of insight that suggested she'd been paying closer attention than I'd realized. We sat on my couch, a leather relic that had survived 2 decades and 1 divorce, drinking coffee and watching the afternoon light shift across the walls. The conversation had grown quieter, more personal. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Shoot. Do you ever get lonely? Living like this, I mean." I considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but lonely's better than being with the wrong person. I learned that lesson the expensive way." She nodded, staring into her coffee cup. "I know exactly what you mean." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried weight, like we were both remembering things we'd rather forget. When she left that afternoon, I found myself hoping I'd see her again soon, not just as a customer, but as whatever we were becoming. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Sarah called the shop. Her kitchen faucet was dripping, she said, and she'd heard I was handy with more than just cars. Would I mind taking a look? I arrived at her house that evening with a toolbox and a six-pack of beer. The place was exactly what I'd expected. A craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch, well-maintained garden, and the kind of attention to detail that suggested someone who took pride in their home. The kitchen faucet was indeed dripping, but it was a simple washer replacement. 10-minute job, tops. As I worked, Sarah moved around the kitchen preparing dinner, and I caught myself watching her efficient movements, the way she seemed to anticipate exactly what spice or utensil she needed next. "You cook often?" I asked, tightening the final fitting. "Every night," she said. "It's therapeutic. Plus, I hate eating alone in restaurants." "What about eating alone at home?" She paused, wooden spoon halfway to her mouth for tasting. "That's different. Home's supposed to be where you can be yourself." I finished with the faucet and tested it. No drips, good pressure. "All set." "Stay for dinner?" she asked. It came out casual, but I caught the underlying note of hope. "If you're sure I won't be imposing." "Marcus, you just saved me $100 plumber bill. The least I can do is feed you." Over chicken marsala and rice, the conversation took a turn toward the personal. Sarah told me about her family. Parents retired in Tucson, sister in Seattle with 2 kids. She'd moved to Green Bay for a job at the library, loved the small city feel after growing up in Chicago. What she didn't mention was the wedding ring she'd started wearing on her right hand instead of her left, or the photograph on the mantle that she'd turned face down. I didn't mention that I'd noticed both details. After dinner, we sat on her porch with beers, watching the neighbors walk their dogs and mow their lawns. The evening had that perfect temperature where you don't notice the air around you, just exist comfortably in it. "Marcus," Sarah said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Depends how personal," she smiled. "Do you think people get second chances? I mean, really get them, not just pretend they do." The question caught me off guard. I think people make their own second chances, but they have to be willing to take them when they come. She was quiet for a long moment, picking at the label on her beer bottle. "I used to be married," she said finally. "David, he died 3 years ago. Heart attack at 41. There it was. The story behind the careful way she held herself, the practiced independence, the house that felt like it was waiting for someone to come home. "I'm sorry," I said, "because what else do you say? Everyone always says that, like it was somehow their fault." She took a long pull from her beer. "The thing is, I don't want to be the widow anymore. I'm tired of being defined by something that happened to me instead of something I chose." I understood then why she'd invited me for dinner, why she called when her faucet dripped. Not because she couldn't handle these things herself, but because she was tired of handling everything alone. "For what it's worth," I said, "I don't see you as a widow. I see you as someone who makes excellent coffee and asks good questions about carburetors." That earned me a smile, a real one, not the polite version she'd been practicing for 3 years. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." When I left that night, Sarah walked me to my truck. As I climbed in, she rested her hand on the doorframe. "Marcus, would it be completely inappropriate if I asked you to come back tomorrow?" "I think my garbage disposal is making weird noises." I grinned. "Completely inappropriate, but I'll be here anyway." The next evening, the garbage disposal was fine. We both knew it, but we went through the motions of me examining it while she pretended to be concerned about potential mechanical failures. "Seems to be running perfectly," I announced after my thorough inspection. "Well, that's disappointing," Sarah said with mock seriousness. "I was looking forward to another home repair emergency." "You know," I said, closing the disposal access panel, "if you want me to come over, you could just ask. No need to invent mechanical problems." She blushed, actually blushed, like I'd caught her in some elaborate scheme. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been making excuses to see you too." The admission hung between us for a moment, honest and uncomplicated. Then Sarah stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her shampoo and count the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "I haven't done this in a while," she said quietly. "Done what?" "Wanted someone to stay." I reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that seemed to surprise us both with its tenderness. "I haven't wanted to stay anywhere in a while," I admitted. She kissed me then, gentle and questioning, like she was asking permission for something we both already knew was going to happen. I kissed her back, answering yes to questions she hadn't asked yet. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "I should probably mention," she whispered, "I make the world's best pancakes." "I should probably mention," I whispered back. "I was hoping you'd say that." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Sarah would call with some domestic crisis, a squeaky door, a running toilet, a ceiling fan that wobbled. I'd arrive with tools and stories from the shop. She'd feed me dinner and share tales from the library's more colorful patrons. It was during one of these evenings in late November that things shifted again. I'd just finished adjusting her front door hinges when she appeared beside me holding 2 steaming mugs. "Hot chocolate," she said, "with real whipped cream." We settled on her porch swing, the November air crisp enough to make the hot drinks feel like small miracles. Sarah had draped a thick wool blanket over both our laps, and I found myself hyper-aware of where her knee pressed against mine. "Marcus," she said after a while, "can I teach you something?" "Depends. Is it going to bruise my ego?" She laughed. "Maybe. Come on." She led me inside to her living room, where bookshelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling. The room smelled like old paper and lavender, with soft jazz playing from speakers I couldn't see. "This," she said, pulling a worn paperback from a shelf, "is my favorite book." She handed me a copy of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The spine was cracked, the pages soft with repeated reading. "I've probably read this 20 times, she continued, "but I've never read it aloud to anyone." I looked at the book, then at her. "You want to read to me?" "Would that be completely boring?" "Try me." We settled back on the couch. Sarah curled against my side with the book open in her lap. Her voice as she read was different than her everyday speaking voice, more theatrical, richer, like she was channeling something deeper. "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. I'd never been much for books, always preferred fixing things with my hands to getting lost in someone else's imagination. But listening to Sarah read, feeling the vibration of her voice against my chest, watching her face change as she became different characters, it was hypnotic. She read for nearly an hour before setting the book aside and looking up at me. "Verdict?" "I think," I said carefully, "I might have been missing out on something." Her smile was brilliant. "Really? Really? But only if you're the one reading." She kissed me then, soft and sweet, and I thought about how she was teaching me to see the world through different eyes. Not just books, but everything. The way afternoon light fell through windows, how food could be art when someone cared enough to make it special. That conversation could be as satisfying as solving a mechanical puzzle. December brought Green Bay's first real snowfall, and with it, an unexpected crisis. Sarah called me at the shop on a Thursday afternoon, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Marcus, I hate to bother you, but my heat's not working. The house is freezing." "On my way," I said, already reaching for my coat. I found her bundled in sweaters and blankets, her breath visible in the cold air of her living room. The furnace was old, probably installed when the house was built, and after 20 minutes of examination, I found the problem. The heat exchanger had cracked, a dangerous situation that meant the whole unit needed to be replaced. "How long?" she asked, hugging herself for warmth. "Few days to get the part, another day to install. This weekend at the earliest." She nodded, trying to hide her dismay. Hotels during tourist season weren't cheap, and I could see her mentally calculating costs. "You'll stay with me," I said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus, I can't." "Sure you can. My place has heat, a decent bed, and I make passable coffee. Besides," I added with a grin, "I'm pretty sure my couch is more comfortable than Murphy's guest room." That first night, she slept on my couch, despite my protest that she should take the bed. I woke around midnight to find her shivering under the thin blanket I'd provided. "Sarah." I shook her gently awake. "You're freezing." "I'm fine," she mumbled, clearly not fine at all. "Come on." I helped her up, led her to my bedroom. "Take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "Don't be ridiculous." She was more awake now, her eyes serious in the dim light from the hallway. "The bed's big enough for both of us. We're adults." She was right, of course. But as I lay beside her that first night, careful to stay on my side of the mattress. I was acutely aware of every breath she took, every small movement she made. It was both torture and the most content I'd felt in years. The next morning I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Sarah stood at my stove wearing one of my old flannel shirts over her jeans, humming softly to herself. Her hair was messy from sleep, and she looked so perfectly at home in my kitchen that something inside my chest squeezed tight. "Morning," she said, turning to smile at me. "Hope you don't mind. I raided your fridge." "Not at all." I moved to pour myself coffee, deliberately brushing against her as I reached for a mug. She didn't step away. "Your furnace should be here tomorrow," I said. "I'll install it Sunday." "Okay." She was quiet for a moment, flipping bacon with more attention than the task required. "Marcus?" "Yeah? What if we didn't rush to fix it?" I set down my coffee cup. "What do you mean?" She turned to face me fully, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I mean, what if I stayed here a few more days, just to make sure everything's working properly?" "Just to make sure," I repeated, fighting a smile. "Exactly, for safety reasons. Can't be too careful." She stepped closer, sliding her arms around my waist. "So you wouldn't mind the company?" "I think," I said, pulling her closer, "I could probably tolerate it." She stayed a week, then another. Before either of us acknowledged it, her toothbrush had found a home next to mine in the bathroom cabinet. Her books had migrated to my nightstand, and my morning routine had expanded to include making coffee for two. Christmas was especially magical that year. Sarah insisted on getting a real tree, something I hadn't bothered with in years. We spent an entire Saturday morning at the tree farm, debating the merits of various evergreens while snow fell gently around us. "This one," she announced, stopping in front of a perfectly symmetrical Douglas fir. "It's twice as tall as my ceiling. We'll make it work." And we did. I trimmed 2 feet off the bottom while Sarah dug through boxes of ornaments she'd retrieved from her house. Each decoration had a story: the wooden angel her grandmother had carved, the glittery snowflake from her first apartment, the silly reindeer David had bought during their last Christmas together. I watched her hang that final ornament carefully, her face softening with memory. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, stepping back to survey our handiwork. "Yeah, it feels right, having them here. Like past and present can coexist." That evening, we sat in the dark living room with only the tree lights glowing, drinking wine and listening to old Christmas carols. Sarah was curled against my side, tracing patterns on my chest with her finger. "Marcus? I love this. Being here with you, creating new traditions. It feels like coming alive again." I tightened my arms around her. "I love it too." She lifted her head to look at me. "Do you think David would approve?" The question surprised me with its vulnerability. I considered it seriously, thinking about the man in the photographs she'd shown me. Kind eyes, easy smile, the way he'd clearly adored her. "I think," I said carefully, "that anyone who loved you would want you to be happy, and I think he'd approve of someone who treats you like you deserve to be treated." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "You always know the right thing to say." "Not always, but I try." She kissed me then, soft and grateful, and I marveled again at how this woman had changed everything. My perspective, my priorities, my definition of home. In March, Sarah asked me to visit her at the library. "There's something I want to show you," she said over breakfast, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Plus, I think it's time you met my other world." The Green Bay Public Library was a beautiful old Carnegie building, all high ceilings and tall windows that filled the space with golden afternoon light. Sarah led me through the main reading room, past patrons hunched over newspapers and students surrounded by textbooks, to a smaller room in the back. "This is the local history archive," she explained, unlocking a glass door with keys from her pocket. "It's my special project." Inside, the room was lined with filing cabinets, old photographs, and box after box of documents. Sarah moved through the space with obvious pride, pulling out manila folders and leather-bound volumes. "Look at this," she said, opening a thick album. "Photographs of Green Bay from the 1920s through the 1960s. And this," she gestured to a wall map covered in colored pins. "This shows where every significant building in the historic district used to be." I studied the map, then noticed something that made me smile. Reed's auto is marked here. I know, I've been researching it. She pulled out a file folder. Your grandfather opened the garage in 1952. Before that, the building was a blacksmith shop run by a man named Henryk Kowalski, probably related to the deli owner next door. She showed me old photographs of the building, newspaper clippings about my grandfather's business, even his original business license application. I felt something tighten in my chest as I looked at pictures of a younger version of my father, working alongside his own dad. Why did you do all this? I asked. Sarah closed the folder carefully. Because it's your history, because the people we love should know where they come from. Just then, a woman appeared in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, wearing a stern expression that immediately reminded me of my high school principal. Sarah, you know archives aren't supposed to be used for personal... The woman stopped when she saw me. Oh, I didn't realize you had a visitor. Ms. Patterson, this is Marcus Reed. Marcus, this is my supervisor, Margaret Patterson. The woman's expression shifted slightly, recognition flickering in her eyes. Reed, as in Reed's Auto. Yes, ma'am. Your father fixed my car for 20 years. Honest man, fair prices. She looked between Sarah and me, clearly assessing our relationship. Sarah, I need to speak with you about the budget meeting tomorrow. After Ms. Patterson left, Sarah sighed. She's not happy about the archive project, says it's not a priority, that we should focus on digital resources instead. What does that mean? It means she wants to box everything up, put it in storage, maybe transfer some of it to the Historical Society, but probably not. Sarah's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She thinks local history is old-fashioned. That evening, I found myself thinking about those photographs, about my grandfather's calloused hands in that old picture, about Sarah's passion for preserving stories that would otherwise be lost. The next week, I showed up at the library on a Saturday morning with my toolbox and a plan. Sarah met me at the employee entrance, looking confused. Marcus, what are you doing here? I'm here to fix something. I gestured toward the archive room. You said Ms. Patterson thinks the archive isn't modern enough. Let's make it modern. Over the next month, we spent every Saturday morning upgrading the archive room. I installed better lighting, built custom shelving units that maximize space, and set up a small work area with a scanner and computer. Sarah organized everything with the efficiency of someone who'd been dreaming of this project for years. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a cramped storage room became a proper research center, professional and inviting. More importantly, other staff members started stopping by, asking about the photographs, sharing their own family stories. You know, Sarah said one Saturday as we admired our handiwork, I think Ms. Patterson is coming around. She actually asked me to prepare a presentation about the archive for the board meeting next month. Think she'll approve the funding to keep it going? I think, Sarah said, slipping her arms around my waist, she'll have a hard time saying no to something that's already proven successful. She was right. Not only did the board approve continued funding for the archive, they allocated money for Sarah to expand the project citywide. Within 3 months, she was leading workshops on family genealogy and local history research. Watching her present to a room full of engaged community members, I realized something. Sarah hadn't just been preserving other people's histories in that archive room. She'd been creating space for new stories to begin, including ours. When she introduced me to the crowd as the man who helped make all this possible, I felt a pride that had nothing to do with the shelves I'd built or the lights I'd installed. It was the pride of being part of something larger than myself, of building something meaningful with someone I loved. After the presentation, as we cleaned up the room together, Sarah paused in collecting papers. Marcus, can I tell you something? Always. The day I started researching your family's garage, it wasn't really about the archive. It was because I wanted to understand where you came from, what shaped you. She looked up at me. I wanted to know your story so I could see how mine might fit with it. I pulled her close, kissing her forehead. And what did you decide? I decided, she said softly, that some stories are better when they become one story. Spring brought new challenges and deeper commitments. Sarah's lease was up in May, and we found ourselves having conversations about the future with increasing frequency. I could renew for another year, she said one evening, as we walked through the park near her house. You could. Or, or, she stopped walking, turned to face me. Or I could officially move in with you. Not just because my furnace broke or my lease is up, but because I want to build a life with you. My heart hammered against my ribs. Is that what you want? It's what I've wanted for months. I just wasn't sure if you felt the same way. I cupped her face in my hands, looked directly into those storm cloud eyes that had captivated me from the beginning. Sarah, the day your car broke down was the luckiest day of my life. I can't imagine going back to the way things were before you. So yes, I want you to move in. I want your books on my shelves and your coffee mug in my sink and your terrible taste in movies cluttering up my Netflix queue. She laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. My taste in movies is not terrible. It's absolutely terrible, and I love it. 1 year after our first meeting, on a Tuesday evening in October, I was closing up the shop when Sarah walked in, carrying a picnic basket and wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Going somewhere special? I asked, wiping my hands clean on a rag. We are. Change of plans. You're not cooking tonight. Oh, really? And what makes you think I'm available for mysterious dinner dates? She walked up to me, straightened my collar with the practiced familiarity of someone who'd been doing it for months. Because I called Murphy, and he said you've been moping around all day, checking your phone every 5 minutes. I don't mope. You absolutely mope. It's actually quite endearing. She led me to her car, the same white sedan I'd fixed that first day, now running smoothly with regular maintenance and my careful attention. We drove to the lake, where she'd set up a blanket and battery-powered lanterns on a small bluff overlooking the water. What's the occasion? I asked as we settled onto the blanket. Does there need to be one? She unpacked the basket, sandwiches, fruit, a bottle of wine, chocolate chip cookies that I knew she'd made from scratch because she'd never buy store-bought when homemade was an option. We ate and talked and watched the sun set over Green Bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made the whole world look like a postcard. As darkness settled around us, Sarah moved closer, leaning against my shoulder. Marcus? Yeah? I have something for you. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small wrapped box. My stomach jumped. It was too small to be anything but jewelry, too carefully wrapped to be casual. It's not what you think, she said quickly, seeing my expression. Open it. Inside was a key, simple, brass, newly cut. It's to my house, she said. I know we've been living together in your apartment, but my house has that workshop space in the basement you've been wanting, and the garden you pretend not to care about, but I've seen you looking at. I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight. I'm not asking you to give up your apartment or make any big decisions tonight, she continued, echoing words she'd spoken months ago in a different context. I'm just saying that if you want a home that's truly ours, not just yours with my stuff in it, then maybe we could make that happen. I looked up at her face, illuminated by the soft glow of our lanterns. And what about David? David will always be part of my story, she said simply, but he doesn't get to write the ending. We do. I leaned forward and kissed her, tasting wine and possibility and the promise of a future we'd build together. Yes, I said against her lips. Yes to the house, yes to the workshop, yes to pretending I don't care about your garden while secretly learning the names of all your plants. She laughed, pulling back to look at me. Really? Really, on one condition. What's that? We keep the apartment too, for backup, and because Murphy would never forgive me if I moved out completely. Deal. We packed up the picnic and drove back to her house, our house, in comfortable silence. As I unlocked the front door with my new key, Sarah slipped her hand into mine. Welcome home, she said softly. I've been home for months, I replied. I just didn't have the key to prove it. Some people believe in destiny, others in luck. I believe in second chances and broken starters and the willingness to stop your truck for a stranger in distress. Mostly I believe that sometimes the most important fixing you can do isn't on engines or faucets or furnaces. It's on hearts that have learned to trust again, lives that have found new purpose, and love that proves itself stronger than loss. Sarah taught me that home isn't a place you inherit or rent or buy. It's something you build day by day, choice by careful choice, with someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. And that, I've learned, is the most honest work of all.